I'm like, oh.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Karger. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to this very special event, a conversation with Cate Blanchett. I am the chief correspondent at Fandango, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Cate Blanchett. Welcome, Cate. We're all very happy to see you in this country because for the past few months, while we've been talking about all of these award-worthy films, you've been hard at work, you've been home in Australia, so we're happy to have you here.
Yes, thank you. It's so lovely to be here.
So this crowd has just seen Blue Jasmine. Some of you, I imagine, for the first time, raise your hand? Wow. And for second, third? Yeah.
Come on, now be honest.
Fourth time. Okay, well, I'll give you a prize. That's very, very impressive.
Stalker!
Let me very logically start at the beginning here. You know, people love to tell the stories of how Woody Allen engaged them to work on his films. What was the process? How did it all happen that the two of you connected on this one?
Like probably a lot of people in this room, I'd seen the that exquisite documentary that was made on him a few years ago, and that was my research for the film, was seeing how other actors' experiences, because one of the most terrifying things, as a lot of you would know, is working with your heroes. And I think you know, the fear and the reverence that goes along with that can be kind of stultifying. So anyway, I watched that, and invariably they all said, not his peers necessarily, not the Diane Keatons and Diane Weises who were from his, you know, social group in a way, but certainly people from my age group invariably said that they went to his office. It was excruciating. It was brief, and they felt that they, you know, he couldn't stand them, and they ended up in a film, and they didn't, you know, speak to him, and they'd never know whether they liked, you know, he liked their work or not. But fortunately, as you say, I live in Australia, so he was forced to talk to me on the telephone. And it was kind of an exquisite pleasure having watched the documentary. I just kept talking to him and kept him on the line, even though he really didn't want to talk to me.
Sounds like sounds like Jasmine on the airplane.
Exactly. Yeah, that's probably why I was cast. But he basically said, it was as brief. He said, "I have a script. Would you like to read it?" And the thing is. And I'm not unique in this way. I mean, when Woody Allen calls, when Martin Scorsese calls, when you're lucky enough to get those calls, as I was, you're going to do it, whatever they ask you to do. And then so I'd already said yes, and then the script arrived, and I could not believe my luck. I mean, it is the most. I've been working in the theatre primarily for the last 6 years, running the Sydney Theatre Company with my husband, so producing and performing on stage, and haven't really made a film for a long time. And I've been used to reading play scripts, a lot of classics, and I'm not that good at reading film scripts, to be honest, because you know, as a lot of you would know, you get to the end of the shoot and there's maybe one original page and the rest are taupe and red and pink, and you know, there's been 13 different writers on it. But you get a Woody Allen script, and syllable for syllable, page by page, rhythm to rhythm, character by character, it's exquisite. And I felt that this was a piece that had been, it was timeless. It was drawing from those great long legacies in American drama. You know, the Mary Tyrones and Long Day's Journey into Night, the Blanche Dubois, all of Tennessee Williams' sort of deluded and bewildered characters, you know, have such a sort of a romanticized sense of self in a very brutal world. But yet it was so full of zeitgeist. It was so post-financial crisis. It felt really current. And so it was a gift, frankly.
And in the conversation...
That was a long answer.
No, that's
you
good.
You can just cut it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us,
okay,
and have a great night. I mean, so I'm sure you're joking that you did all the talking. Maybe he got a word or two in edgewise when you were speaking the first time. What did he tell you about?
No, he said, "Great, good, okay, thank you." They were all wind-ups.
So when the script arrived, did you have no idea at all about what the storyline was or the character or anything? You were surprised to read it, or had he given you any inkling of what you
No,
were gonna read?
he said he'd written something and he'd be thrilled if I'd read it and tell me what I thought of it, and he would, like to work with me. And I said, that's lovely. And no, I had no idea.
That's crazy. We have taken questions from you all, and because this is streaming live, I can't actually have you ask them because you won't be heard, so I'm going to ask them for you. This is a question from Teresa Michelle Ruiz, who's here. Just raise your hand so we can see you. Hi. I love this question. First of all, I love your comment at the beginning. This is my third time seeing Blue Jasmine. Your acting is pure genius.
That's okay, next question.
What was the most emotionally difficult scene for you to shoot, and why?
Well, look, the first day on any film set is utterly excruciating, humiliating. And as Peter Brooks said, the joy about getting through the first day is that you never have to do it again. So in a way, that was pretty brutal. Because the thing is, Woody is a director who's made films of such tonal variety that, is this going to be more in the line of Bananas or Interiors? And the script was funny. It was absurd and blackly comic, but it was also incredibly tragic. So, it was emotionally wrought in the sense that we were all finding the tone. But we shot the last scene a couple of times. I'd suggested to Woody that I have a shower. I mean, not me, the character. I mean, the person, the character. I do shower regularly. But I meant that maybe what she's doing is she's cleansing herself, and that she shouldn't put herself back together, so that you see the silhouette of Jasmine at the end, but she's bedraggled. As when you see someone who's distraught, all the pieces are there, but something doesn't quite fit. So we'd made that decision together, but we did that scene once, and then he came up at the end and he said, "Look, I'm really sorry, don't take this personally, but I want to shoot this again." I went, "Okay." And he just said, "Look, it's too long. I want to just think about it." So then we went back and shot it another week later, which, you're never happy when you have to necessarily do it. But then there was something inherently theatrical about the way he works. The fact that he only does one take. You enter stage left, you do this crazy scene in one shot, which is like the audience looking in a proscenium arch, and then you exit stage right. And so, in a way, a lot of that felt like a rehearsal, and that's the way I sort of chose to think about it. God, I really shouldn't. I think I've answered that question. So yes, perhaps that one.
When you think about his process of working in comparison to all the other directors you've worked with, what goes through your mind? Did you have moments where you were sitting down and talking to him? For instance, in that scene that he wanted to reshoot, did he explain to you exactly why? Or you have the paper, he says action, and you just do it? How collaborative, I guess, is the process?
I found him incredibly collaborative. He sort of talks himself out of the picture, but he absolutely knows, he certainly knows what he doesn't want, and he is really excited when actors will, put themselves on the line and throw something up, because then he does that yes and exercise. He goes, okay, well, yeah, we could do that. And if you ask him questions that aren't, as we all ask as actors, let's face it, a lot of the questions we ask the directors are really veiled. The veiled question, did you like what I did? And, he can sniff that a mile off. So if you're actually asking him a genuine question about how, whether a certain element of the scene is necessary or working, or perhaps we could move here because it might have more resonance, he will absolutely offer it. But with that, I just said, because I prefer to be brutally honest with people. I would much prefer for a director, as he did tell me frequently, "That's awful, you're awful. The audience has left the theatre, should we go again?" It's, when he says it, it's kind of endearing, but, it's... But I would much prefer to hear that than to someone having a sense that they're somehow going to fix it in post, because there is no post with Woody.
Right.
And so I did ask him. I said, "Look, what is it? Is it do you want to change the lines up? Do you want to do it faster, slower, quicker, happier, sadder? Is it too internal?" And he said, "No, I just want to write it again." So, you know, he's very clear, but you just have to ask him clear questions.
Well, if there were moments where he said that was awful, the audience has left the theater, were there ever moments where he said, I really liked that, Cate?
I think when he would come in and say, oh, okay, and he'd add something to it. Like there was a certain scene which, actually looking at the movie, is a very brief scene of Alec Baldwin's character, my character in the kitchen. And he shot, we did like 9 takes of that scene. And it was so much fun with Alec because, you know, they're all theatre animals and everything. It was so much fun trying, you know, should she be drinking? Should she be really out of it? Does he know how much she's been drinking? Why has she been drinking? And so we played around with that scene. So there was certain, because he's written the thing, and you know he's not going to edit around it. You know what the edit points are in it. That he just wanted to, and I was really grateful for the opportunity to do this, to have moments where Jasmine broke more and broke less. You know, because when you're dealing with someone who is as fragile and combustible as Jasmine, you don't want to always break at the same pitch. Because sometimes she's more capable of holding herself together. It depends who she's speaking to or what circumstance she's in. Sorry, I don't know if that answered your question.
Obviously, Woody is very cognizant of an ensemble. I think it's not a coincidence that he always lists the actors in one clump alphabetically. You just gave an acceptance speech in a
God, it's so exciting. When you see the film and you see yourself in that iconic title thing, it was right there.
Yeah. At what point in the process were you brought on? Was there anyone else that was cast by the time you agreed to do it? And if you were the first, what was your thought process?
How many actresses had he gone through and said no before he got to me? Probably thousands. I didn't ask that question.
Yeah, exactly. What was your reaction when all the other people came on board? Because it is a very interesting and eclectic group.
It's so eclectic. I mean, they're stage creatures to a man. And I relish that because to me it was such an intersection between, certainly personally, all the work I've been doing in theatre, given that Jasmine is playing a role of herself, as we all do in life, but she's doing it sort of to an epic degree. You know, and she's so dislocated from herself, often as a character, an actor is from their character on stage. You have to have a third eye. But to work with Sally Hawkins, who, I mean, I've long admired, and I was very grateful to have 2 weeks in New York with her when I was on stage in a production of Uncle Vanya. She happened to be in New York, and we did a lot of chatting about backstory, stuff that is not necessarily tangible in the actual screenplay, but it's a texture, and it's a trust that you develop with another actor. But I think that everyone was really humbled themselves to the task.
It's interesting you say that everyone who works in this film has stage experience. In the case of someone like Andrew Dice Clay, he does have stage experience, but it's a different kind of stage experience, isn't it? I mean, is there someone in the cast, whether it's him or someone else, who really surprised you as you were filming it, the way they worked or what they brought to it?
Yeah, Dice was amazing. I mean, he said afterwards, you know, he was absolutely petrified. But you would never know. I mean, and can you think of a more brutal medium than stand-up? I mean, I remember when I was at university and a lot of my friends are doing clowning workshops where literally they got up onto the stage and went, nope, not funny. I mean, it's the most brutal medium. And for him to survive that and then to tell me that he was nervous about working with Peter and myself and Woody, I just think, are you kidding? But he was remarkable. And I think it's, he played such a beautiful, noble arsehole.
You know, I think this is a performance that, I feel like people use this a lot to describe a performance, but I think it's so apt in this case. This is a true high wire act on your part, because just a little bit off and it would have seemed completely ridiculous. And I think the beauty of your performance is in the way you calibrate Jasmine's moods, her growing insanity, particularly because the movie shuttles back and forth between so many different time periods that it's not a linear story. How were you able to keep in your mind at what point on the spectrum of her mania she was in each scene? Did you have a spectrum in mind? Did you have notches on that scale? How did it all come about?
Well, for me, it was a really interesting exercise to calibrate what particular cocktail she was on at any particular time. That was one of the first things I set out to do, to pick apart with, was she coming down from Xanax? Had she just taken a Xanax? Had she taken it with alcohol? And that something I worked with the makeup artists in particularly in San Francisco, was that I said, I really want to be, it's not particularly attractive, but I really want her to be very sweaty. Because, I mean, I don't know whether look, maybe what actor hasn't, but I remember I suffered a panic attack. I was like 25, and in the middle of the night, I woke up for no reason. I was really happy. I was working. Often it's when you're happy these things happen, perhaps. But I was sweating, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And so I thought it's interesting for her to have those physical symptoms that she's pushing through. So you don't have to act that, because the visuals are doing that for you. And if we've ever, we've all been in crisis. You don't fall into that crisis if you're a survivor, which she clearly is. You, like Blanche Dubois, you push through it, because the problem can't be me. It's got to be the world. And so so sometimes it was a physical manifestation, and then sometimes it was a psychological delusion, and also there's so many clues in Woody's brilliant screenplay, that she'd had numerous breakdowns. But I think in the end, the most important thing was, given that she's an Upper East Side princess, and given that we all know the moribund nature of the banking world that has sort of left so many people in its destroyed in its wake, the judgment of someone on someone like her is so profound that I had to be more like a dispassionate psychoanalyst and say, why are you doing what you're doing here? Maybe we should have lie down therapy right now. Maybe we've done the sitting up therapy, but because it's the why that's interesting, rather than asking the audience to be sympathetic, because hopefully then it's a more interesting discussion an audience has, because they don't necessarily like her all the time, but they might hopefully understand her.
One of the questions relating to this that came in off the internet from someone named Marie Lane, she says, what specific psychiatric illnesses do you feel your character...
Do I have my...
No.
It's a little personal, but...
No, do you feel Jasmine suffers from? I mean, do you diagnose her, or do you not try to even do that?
Oh, look, I've had several friends who have been diagnosed with one diagnosis or another, and diagnoses are very fashionable. So they're not particularly useful. But it's amazing what you find on YouTube. The amount of people who've taken Xanax. I've never taken Xanax, but the amount of people who've taken Xanax and then go on YouTube and describe the experiences, I'm thankful for for the share or the overshare. But I've read a very, very interesting book by a university lecturer in Australia called Madness, a Memoir. And the book starts off about her experience of being in a psychiatric ward because she really thought she had to chop her arm off. And she tried to cut her own arm off. And that is so extreme. But she describes the logic, the absolute profound logic in that moment about why there was no other alternative but to chop her arm off. And I think we're in crisis, whether it's chopping her arm off or whether it's suddenly you're escalating in a fight with someone and it's suddenly becoming irrational. We all do irrational things, but we're not irrational, it's the other person who's irrational. And so you have to find that internal sense of logic that the character has, and that's the challenge, because it is, without sounding too worthy about it, what we all do, it's an empathetic profession. You walk in somebody else's shoes and you have to sometimes hold their hand and say, this isn't too great what you're doing, but I'm with you through it. But you have to try and understand what it is. So I didn't put a label on her necessarily.
We're talking about the cast, and you have so many great actors to feed off of and work with, but then there's also many moments in the film where you're talking to nobody, you're talking to someone who's not in your mind, or there's someone near you, but you're not really addressing them. Moments where you really kind of are siloed.
Oh no, but she's always talking to somebody. That's the thing. It's never nobody. And I think it's really important that all those moments were, particularly on the bench at the end, she was talking to really specific people. It's like, I remember when people started using mobile phones. This is me. I remember sitting in a cafe in Bondi talking to a friend, and this guy was talking this really big thing, and I said, "What's he doing?" He said, "Oh, that's a mobile phone." I went, "Oh, that'll never take on." So don't talk to me about it. But when you see people, and now it's very commonplace, but when people started having things in their ears, you used to think, you walk along the street, go, "Are they nuts?" And then you realise they're actually talking to someone on a phone, and we've taken that for granted. But if you take yourself back 10 years, they're always talking to someone very specific, and you can tell whether they're having a breakup or, and in that way, they're very specific conversations.
Is there more of a challenge then in doing a scene where your character is talking to someone who's not physically there, where you don't have a physical actor to feed off of and work with?
Yes. Look, it's always much easier when you've got someone to work with, so the image in your mind has to be, very, very strong, and particularly because we shot the San Francisco portion first. A lot of the people that she was talking to in San Francisco, we shot later, so you had to sort of imagine that stuff. But that's the nature of filmmaking, really.
Here's a great question, and if I'm reading your name right, because you have chicken scratch, it's Brian Zarin. Hi, Brian. I love this question. How do you assess your performances from take to make adjustments?
Well, that's where working in the theatre really helps, is that you have an acute sense of audience, an acute awareness of where your fellow players are. And it's not mea culpa, but sometimes you just know. And I think it's having a kind of a honed sense of space. And also, sometimes, when you're in sync with the other actors and a director, it's so strange. I don't know whether you guys have found this, but sometimes you go, "Oh, that wasn't right." You look over to the focus puller and you'll go, "Out of focus." And it's somehow, you've all been out of sync. And I think we were in such a claustrophobic apartment in San Francisco that we all breathed the same rancid air for 5. So we were really overly familiar with one another. So I think that kind of frequently when Sally would feel she'd want to go again, I'd go, "Yes, me too." And so we'd say, "It was out of focus, Woody. I think we're going to have to go again." But it's not about necessarily judging a performance. I'm never happy. It's excruciating. That's why I sit in rocking in the bathroom while you guys are watching the screen going, "Oh!" But at least on stage you can go up and you know that the guy in row J walked out last night, so you're not going to let that happen. Then so you try and rectify it, but you don't get to do that in film.
Is there anything that you've done on film that you can watch and in a comfortable manner?
No.
Wow.
No, but home videos are the worst.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Earlier this evening, I watched you accept an award from the Australian Academy of Cinema and Television Arts for their Best Actress International Prize.
I know, but I was the only Australian in the category.
So it was lovely.
It was
prize.
lovely. It was lovely. No, I was thrilled.
I bring that up because you said something in the speech that struck me. You said that you wanted to thank everybody at the Sydney National Theatre, where you are artistic director, and I think you said
no longer, but I was for
sorry.
5.5 years. Yeah.
Okay, and you said thank you for the last 4 years that I've spent there. If not
5.5.
5.5. Sorry. Thank you for the 7 years that I spent. You said thank you for the time that I've spent there, because without that I couldn't have done Blue Jasmine. And I think you just alluded to that in the way you were answering that question, but I'd be curious to know what exactly you mean by that.
Well, all the great roles that you play on stage stretch you. They stretch your capacity to take on the intangible and the left of field, and your peripheral vision, I think, is expanded, and your sense of audience is honed. But then more tangibly, having played those great roles like like Richard II and Hedda Gabler and Blanche Dubois and Claire in The Maids and Lotte Cotter in this wonderful German play called Gross and Klein, and having produced other people's work, all of that objectivity, subjectivity, expansion, I just felt I was so grateful that this exquisite opportunity that Woody provided me with landed in my lap last year and not, 4 or 5 years earlier. Sometimes those things happen at the right time, and then the cast came together at the right time. It was, I sort of felt ready to fail in that way.
Here's another question that came in off the internet from a woman named Tamala. Who had the brilliant idea of letting Jasmine's mascara smudge under that one eye? Was it your idea or was it Woody's? Or maybe it was an accident. She says it was such a small detail, but such an important one that showed another facet of her mental state.
What's that famous story about Gielgud? The director wanted him to cry, and he said, left eye or right? Oh. And the director was bamboozled and said, right. He said, 1 tear or 2? I can't remember. I mean, that was probably a process of the sweat. And the sweat.
I did read a critical piece that took note of your armpits and how much this critic said it was
I bathed regularly. That was film sweat, I swear.
What exactly is film sweat?
It's a mixture of glycerin.
But the way, because the character and the way the story is told in this nonlinear fashion, I would imagine that the different looks of Jasmine, whether she was totally done up shopping in New York or when her hair was all unkempt, I imagine that was extremely helpful as you were going into Dave's work.
That's it was Susie Benzinger, who did the costumes, was such an ally, because I mean, rarely in any film, and Woody's no different. There's no rehearsal period. And so she and I had that 2 weeks in New York where I'd go in every day and we'd try stuff out and we'd kind of find the world of Jasmine, and then we'd worked out what the recycled world of Jasmine was and what her invented sense of self was in San Francisco, and what bits the feds had let her keep, and what bits she'd held on to, and then who she was in New York. Because, of course, we all do it every day. We all choose what we're going to wear. And with Jasmine, I think the painful thing for her is she's never had a sense of self. She's someone who's grafted herself onto her husband, onto her social network, and the gaping chasm in her is only vaguely covered by her Chanel jacket and her logoed this and, her coiffed that. And, and that's, I think, what makes her incredibly fragile and human in the end. But the skin of that was a pleasure to kind of chart that out with Susie. And also because we had $2.99 in the costume budget, we had to say, well, we have to shoot that by next Wednesday because Chanel needs that back for blah, blah. So there were constraints about it, but we really did work out, say, well, that's a really sad dress, let's keep that for the end, because film is so visual, and people without a character, even opening their mouths, they get a sense of the person by how they've chosen to present themselves.
We've spoken about the other well-known people that are in this film, but as in so many Woody Allen films, there's also people that you've never seen before who come in probably for a day or two and are just so completely memorable. And I've already alluded to her, but I love the woman that you travel with at the beginning of the movie on the plane. And I love watching her face go from thinking that this might be actually kind of interesting that she's sitting with you to cannot wait to get away from you by the time she's at the baggage claim.
I never saw that look.
That's right, because you were probably talking somewhere else.
Yeah. She was great.
Yeah.
I mean, listening acting is really hard to do. Not that I did a lot of this film, did a lot of talking acting, but it's really, really difficult to do. And it's there was such a great payoff for her.
Oh.
She just didn't stop talking.
She didn't stop babbling about her life. I mean, when you're finished with shooting with this woman, do you say, I'm sorry you had to just listen to me babble? Or did you have a nice little parting with her? Or, there's a kind of like... or not? I don't know, I guess I'm very taken with her. I just thought that'd be a kind of a dream thing to do.
I don't have a number, but I...
I don't know, I just thought she was great.
She was fantastic.
Yeah, she was great. Okay.
She
Here's a question. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing the name right. Is it Liza? Yes. With 2 Z's. What advice regarding to preparing a character would you give to your younger self now that you have the experience that you have?
So can you say that again? I was bamboozled by the younger self.
And my obsession with the woman on the plane.
Yes.
What advice in regards to preparing a character would you give your younger self now that you have the experience that you do?
I think that the material reveals what you have to do. I think the other actors tell you what you have to do. And I don't have any particular process. It's very eclectic. And I mean, that's why I'm very grateful I went to drama school, because it does give you a bag of tricks when your own personal bag of tricks wears thin. And God, I got bored of my bag of tricks really early on. But I think it's the advice I'd give myself was let the material speak to you. Have the courage to sit quietly with it and let it tell you that, well, maybe this time I'll try this way, and, you know.
Do you feel like you know women like Jasmine? Have you encountered anyone like her?
In parts, yeah. There was no one person that I based her on. You know, of course, I looked at a lot of interviews and commentaries on a lot of bankers' wives. I spent, you know, a lot of time on the Upper East Side, sort of eating by myself, looking out at the bottom of my sunglasses at other people, and but that's just to get a flavour, because that's a backdrop. In the end, that's from an anthropological perspective, that's really fascinating. But there's an inherent rhythm to the way Woody writes. Entirely different to Shakespeare, but it's the way people talk about Shakespeare. Unless you're on the language, if you're forward with the language, the play will not be heard, because you can't pull it into yourself. And the same thing with Woody is he has a way forward, and it's a sound, it's a rhythm, it's a quality that bonds his films and simultaneously allows his films to be unique. Because I think when the actors hit that rhythm, then something else is unlocked.
I'd be curious to know what you felt you needed to do once this shoot was over. Did you need more time to, let's say, decompress because this character is so intense and complicated, or are you able to shed it fairly quickly?
Look, I was grateful well, I had as I said, these parts don't come along very often. And I had such a great respect and bond with the other actors that it was sad, you know, when it was over. And I loved San Francisco. The interesting thing about playing a role like this is that you go to San Francisco and you suddenly see all the homeless people because you're acutely aware of where Jasmine ends up. Like, it does affect your regard in the time that you shoot. And frankly, I felt so grateful that I wasn't on that park bench, you know. And in a way, I felt that, you know, playing a role like Blanche Dubois that had, like when I played Hedda Gabler, I felt like, oh, that's unfinished business. And I feel in a way that there's roles out there that have been influenced by that maybe I'd like to finish the conversation through another role. And I felt that in a way that Jasmine had closed that chapter for me. And so it felt I was terrified. I went, there goes a career that, you know. But you know, you thought, well, for better or for worse, I've given it my best shot, and I'm not on the park bench.
And now that some time has passed, where do you rank this as far as the most challenging artistic experiences that you've gone through?
It's up there. I mean, I love a challenge. And frequently when you bite off those things, you can't chew it, you know, but that's the risk you take. And frequently I would go home, from a day's shooting and go, I just didn't chew that enough. But then what you have to do is you have to be positive and go, well, I'm going to go and try and chew a bit more tomorrow. But it's certainly up there because it's so complex. And there were so many things that are brought to bear, pressures that are internal and external that are brought to bear on Jasmine. And then, of course, there was the pleasure and pain of working with a hero, which is working with Woody.
To end, I want to ask another audience question that I love. Unfortunately, the person did not leave his or her name, so it's anonymous. And I'm most intrigued by the end of this question. Did you ever have thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not this or that along the way in your career? And if so, how did you deal with those thoughts?
I'm human. I have those thoughts right now. Certainly. I mean, you know, strangely, I mean, someone said to me once, and I think there was a compliment in there. They said, "You have an actor's face," and but I think it's that thing of not having any particular look that is actually really helpful. Not being either, you know, massively plain or massively beautiful. It kind of, that neutrality enables you to hopefully have a foot in both camps, and when someone else does your hair and makeup, you look better than when you do it yourself. But I think that's why you play other people. You know, the flaws, the fears, the sense of incompleteness in yourself. You try and commune or understand that through other people. Not that at all I think that acting is therapy. You know, I get bored with myself like right now, very quickly. And so it's being in dialogue with the other actors. I mean, that's why I love being on stage, because the audience can sense when it's not alive. And I don't know how to do this thing that we do without other people. And I've been fortunate in my career thus far to work with some extraordinary performers who force you to raise your game, and extraordinary directors who ask, when you're asked to do something difficult by someone you respect, you fucking well better do it, you know? And it's when you're asked to do that you grow. And so I'm really avoiding the question about not feeling pretty, aren't I? But no, I'm all the time, yeah.
So would you say in a general sense then that moments of self-doubt are meant to be overcome, or moments of self-doubt can be helpful? I don't think a person worth their weight in salt has never experienced doubt. I mean, you can affirm away, but doubt is a more interesting place to work from, I think. I think the minute you have answered a question in a scene, the scene's over. You know, you don't have to solve the question. You just need to ask the question. And that keeps it active between you and the person that you're playing with, I think. Well, it's thrilling to watch you do it, and it's so great to talk to you. So
thank you
so much,
very
Cate.
much. Thank you.
And thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.